Good morning or good afternoon, Year 10, depending on when you are listening to / watching this. I hope you're all doing very, very well. Not the joyous sunshine that we had at the beginning of lockdown, but never mind, I'm sure it will return. Only a couple weeks left, Year 10. Keep plowing through, keep working hard. Don't start thinking the summer holidays have started already. Today is poetry again. So if you have your poetry anthologies, please get it out and look at the poem My Last Duchess. If you don't have your poetry anthologies, don't panic. I will be uploading a copy of the poem along with this, in Go for Schools, along with the link to this tutorial. So, possessive. Is this a good or a bad quality for a lover to have? If you think it's good, why is it good? Could you connect it to showing that they care and showing that there's passion in the relationship? If it's bad, why is it bad? What can possessiveness do that can be negative? What kind of actions and behaviours can possessiveness lead to? Why could that be a problem? If you can, think of one or two examples from literature or TV or film where there is a possessive lover. And does it end well? Who's the possessive lover? What happens with that? Does that work out being something very good? Does it cause lots of problems? Does it mean things end badly? Think about those examples and just note them down. So today's date, starter, possessive. Give me the example, one or two brilliant if you can. Remember, it can be literature, TV or film, and get those jotted down. Pause there if you need to. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So our title for today is My Last Duchess. That's written on the left hand side of the screen, or it's in your anthology if you have that. Please write that down and underline it. Lesson objectives: to understand the context and the story, because actually that's what this poem is. It's a story of the poem My Last Duchess. And to begin to examine the Duke's character and key quotes. So, what is the poem about? Now, the poem is a dramatic monologue. If you do not know the term dramatic monologue, put that in your vocabulary bank, okay? And the definition is right on this slide with it. So a dramatic monologue means it's a poem written in the voice of a character. Because it's a monologue, it means we only hear the voice of one character. We very much always get given the sense of another character because we get given the idea of them talking to someone, but we only hear one character's voice. Now, in this particular dramatic monologue, our narrator is a male, and it's an imaginary Italian duke. But how imaginary is questionable. So, bit of context. Again, if you've got your anthologies, we write the context in the little kind of. If you see you've got the poem, then there's a little kind of like black line going across the top of the page that's above the picture and the name of the author and the date. In that little strip above, that's where we put our context information. So, Browning wrote the poem around 1842. However, it seems likely that his idea for the poem is based on Alfonso II, the Duke of Ferrara. That's a place in Italy. I think it's on the east coast, I think Ferrara is, whose first wife died after only 3 years of marriage. And this all happened in the 1500s, so around 1561. She was, if memory serves me correctly, only 16 when Alfonso the Duke married her. The subject matter of the poem is, in essence, the marriage market. And that would have ensured that the poem was topical in 1850s Britain. So the marriage market, if you think about it as being the Victorian version, in a way, of Match.com, or kind of at its lowest ebb Tinder, but more kind of Match.com, things like that. But instead of it being the individuals that kind of try to present themselves and get themselves a partner, it would be their parents. So the marriage market works in a variety of ways, but one of the most popular ones was literally in terms of a market. So parents would either bring kind of pictures of their daughter or son, and they would kind of be at stalls, and other parents, prospective parents, would go around and moving around between, and they also would have pictures, or they might even have their son or daughter with them. Daughters were probably more likely to be brought to the market than the sons, but the sons could be there as well, because predominantly it was your parents that made this choice for you. Sons would have a little bit more of a leeway, but still, depending on the family, very limited as to how much power they would have over who they married, because they would be at risk of being written out of the will, especially higher class sons. So this whole idea of this arranged marriage and this negotiation over marriage, because that's what it would be, a negotiation, would be very pertinent to a Victorian audience. So, what is the poem about? The Duke now wants to marry the Count's daughter. He is discussing this with the council representative. So this is what I'm talking about, it being an arrangement. The Count isn't there. Even though it's his daughter, he sent one of the people that work for him, okay, an emissary. He sent somebody to negotiate and discuss the proposition, because it's almost kind of like a business contract of this marriage. But as the Duke does so, he shows his guest around his palace. During the conversation and tour, he reveals a portrait of his previous wife, his last Duchess. And this all about that last Duchess is the essence of the poem. So we've got the background, we've got the setup, we've got the understanding of what is happening to make this dramatic monologue take place. But the focus of the poem is all about that last Duchess. So, things to think about while you listen/read. Okay, I want you to write down one thing you think about the narrator. Okay, you could do that while you're listening and reading, or once you've listened to it all. Also, what we learn about their relationship, i.e., about the Duke and the last Duchess' relationship. And what do you get a sense that was expected of her? How was she expected to respond? Now, I've got a clip of a nice dramatic reading. A link, sorry, not a clip, I'm a fool, of a nice dramatic reading from YouTube, so you can type that in and listen to that. I'm also going to read the poem now, so you can listen to it while I read it, and you can then have a second reading from the YouTube clip. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder. Now, let me try that sentence again. Now, Frau Poundorf's hands work busily a day, and there she stands. What please you sit and look at her? I've said, Frau Poundorf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus, sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek. Perhaps Frau Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint must never hope to reproduce the faint half blush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up that spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked whate'er she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or a blush, at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900-year-old name with anybody's gift, who'd stoop to blame that sort of trifling, even had you skill in speech, which I have not. to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. Here you miss, or there you exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, and then would it be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who passed without much the same smile? This grew. I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. What please you rise? We'll meet the company below. Then, I repeat, the count your master's no munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine own dowry will be disallowed. Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed, at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together down. Sir, notice Neptune, though taming a seahorse, thought a rarity, which Klaus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Dun, dun, dun. So have a think. Just from that first reading, don't worry about any of the phrases or words you're not sure of just yet, or if you've understood all the elements. Just from that first, what do you think about the narrator, about the Duke? How does he come across? What type of person does he seem to be? What do we learn about the Duke and the last Duchess's relationship? Did it seem to be quite happy? Was it relaxed? Were they very loving? Or were there problems? And if they were, what were they? What did you get his expectations of her were? How did she respond to those expectations? I don't need lots and lots of detail. I don't need quotes to support anything at this point. I just want you to write down a couple of sentences for each of those questions. So pause it here because I'm going to go on to the next slide. So now I want you to write is the subheading, the Duke. Okay, now those of you who have me this year, you'll be used to doing this because we've certainly done it a couple of times. I want you to draw, this should take at least, pay attention to this please guys, because there's always 2 or 3 of you that don't, at least half a page. You're going to draw the outline of the Duke. Now if you're a very good artiste, draw that outline in a very beautiful and artistic manner. If, like me, you lack the artistic skills, then just draw the outline of like a gingerbread man, like you can see on the left side of the page. But you have to make it big enough because you're going to write inside and outside, okay? So once you've drawn that outline, inside the outline, you are going to write down what you think the Duke is thinking or feeling at different points in the poem, okay? And what you then need to do, once you've written down those feelings, make sure you leave space around each of those feelings or thoughts that you've written down, and then find 2 or 3. If you can only find 1, that's still fine, but if you could, 2 or 3 quotes to support your ideas. Do little arrows coming off of those thoughts or feelings, and then give me the quotes coming off of the arrows, okay? Make sure you use quotation marks. And you have to really think about, look at where do we get any sense of what he thinks about either the painter, thinks about his new marriage, or thinks about the last Duchess. How does he feel about the last Duchess? How does he feel about things she did? Okay, give me those emotions as well. Then on the outside, I want you to write down what he does, i.e. how he acts, the things he actually does. Okay, so that's movements, orders, speech. Okay, and again, exactly the same as we did with the things on the inside, find me 2 or 3 quotes. Again, if you can only find 1, that's fine, but if you can aim to get 2 or 3, brilliant. If you need to keep those instructions up while you do that, please pause here because I'm going to move on to the next slide. So, task cards. As you can see, they are in different colours. Full marks if you spotted that they are in learner colours. So, you are only going to do the activities that are in the boxes with your learner colour. Okay, so reds, you've got 2 boxes. I want you to do both of those activities. The vocabulary and words task, red, would be the best card to start with, okay? Because that's going to make the pronouns and names easier, okay? Yellows, you've only got one box because the task in your box is quite a bit longer, okay? So you've got one box of tasks to do. Greens, you have two. I would probably say the body and actions might be the easiest one to start with, but it's your choice, greens. Purples, you're going to be very excited by this. I want you to do the 2 green tasks and your purple box, okay? I can mentally hear you all moaning at me, but, you know, come on, guys, you're purple. Push through the pain. You can do it. Again, you're going to need to pause this here so that you can see each of the different activities you're doing. I would like them all subheaded. So where there's a different bullet point, that means you subhead explaining, either writing out that question or titling that task, okay? I'm going to move on to the next slide, so you pause here. Now, you've broken up the poem, okay? You've started to look at some key quotes. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to think about that breakdown in more detail. So I want you to draw a table like this. Don't draw the lines. So where you've got 1 to 13, and then you've got a line underneath that separating the column for 13 to 21. Don't draw that yet, because you don't know how much space you're going to need to write that content. Okay, so basically, I'm going to go through and do the first section with you. Okay, so lines 1 to 13. So that's My Last Duchess, down to How Such a Glance Came There. Okay, so what's happening? What's the content? So that's My Last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. So the Duke is introducing the portrait of his late wife, isn't he? And he's describing her as My Last Duchess. Okay, so that immediately sets up a sense that they're not together, which leaves us with this concept that it's most probable, right from that word last, that she's not alive. Okay, but last also implies that there's going to be a new. So then he goes on, he's boasting, isn't he? He's boasting about this painting. I call that piece a wonder now. So he's calling this portrait a wonder. Think about how dramatic that term is, wonder. A wonder is something extraordinary. It's something almost magical. It's something that's kind of transcending almost. So it's very hyperbolic almost, the way he's describing that painting. Frau Pandolf's hands work busily a day. Now, the fact that he's named the painter, okay, that could imply that this is somebody to be regarded. This is a famous painter. This is somebody to be impressed by. Not only did I have this beautiful portrait drawn that's a wonder, but it's, you know, this guy did it, Frau Pandolf. He's boasting. He's kind of bigging up this painting and himself in retrospect of that, because he's the one that had this painting done. He had the connections and the money to get this achieved. Then he starts to describe the painting. So work busily a day, and there she stands. Will please you sit and look at her. So will please you sit and look at her. He's now kind of giving an instruction. It's a very polite, courteous instruction, but it's almost as though there isn't an option to say no. Okay, so he's telling that emissary, that person he's talking to sit down and look. So it's not just a passing moment. He doesn't just want to note this portrait. He wants this person to sit there and really study that portrait. And then he said, I said Frau Pandolf by design. Now he's repeated the fact that it's that painter. So that reinforces the idea that this is a painter that's of stature, that's of credibility. This is like the name drop that we would have nowadays when, you know, people talk about more famous people than that they've seen or spent time with. He's kind of in essence doing that. For never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth of passion in its earnest glance, but to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I have drawn for you, but I. So we learn a couple of things there, don't we? We learn that portrait is usually covered in a curtain. It's hidden, okay? Nobody else touches that curtain but him. He is the only one who has control, okay? Really, this is really starting to that possessive pronoun in the opening line, we're really starting to already get quite a strong sense of how controlling this Duke is. So this portrait is normally covered by a curtain. That's quite unusual. Portraits on walls, especially in old houses with these big families where they have portraits up of many a generation back, they're not hidden. They're on public display. But yet this portrait is covered by a curtain, which again reiterates and really kind of starts to heighten that sense of his need for control, especially his control over that wife. Okay, so that's the kind of detail that we would put in that content. So we've got lines 1 to 13, what happens? Right, we're introduced to the painting. We're told that the painting was done by a pretty notable painter. We've got the Duke boasting about it. We're being shown signs of him being quite kind of controlling, and we see that by the fact that we learn that the painting is usually covered in a curtain. He's the only one that opens it and chooses when and who sees it. So I want you to read the next kind of sections of the poem and do this task for that. Okay, you're just roughly surmising what is happening in each of those sections. Okay, again, if you need to keep the different number breakdown and have the table up so you can see how to lay it out, please press pause here because I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so these are in colours, but as you can see, they're not in your learner colours, so you're all doing these. Okay, so you need to find evidence. So each of the little kind of circles or ovals are a subheading. Okay, so you're going to write down, for example, the Duke, little dot, the Duke is a controlling man. Now, find evidence for that. Give me at least one, if not two quotes to evidence the idea that the Duke is controlling. Do exactly the same for the Duke is ruthless, the Duke is rich, the Duke is a proud man, the Duke is a jealous man. Okay. You don't need to zoom in and analyse these quotes at this point. I just want you to be practicing finding quotes that really explicitly give us certain information, okay? So pause this here so you know what you're looking for when you're finding your quotes. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I'm not going to read this through for you. You guys can read this because it would literally just be me reading a slide to you. You already have a bit of a sense of iambic pentameter from Macbeth, but this is just kind of reminding you and reiterating it. And really, for those of you looking for those higher marks, really think about this and explore that rhythm and sound, and really try and beat out those that rhythm, that da-dum, 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 as you read the poem. Reread it and get that rhythm, because if you can be comfortable with identifying that and you can talk about that rhythm and that iambic pentameter and the impact it makes, really elevate your analysis in your essays. That AO2 analysis really develops if you can explore this. So again, if you want to read this through without me whittering over it, press pause. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so prepare a number of readings. So this is your most challenging task so far in this PowerPoint. It's not something that is that difficult, it's just more challenging than what we've done already. And this is, if you remember, where we kind of break down how to structure our what, how, why paragraphs, we always have kind of like how for being alternative interpretations. The reason this is key is because that helps you get from it just being, okay, you've understood it, to you're really thinking about it. You're really exploring and analysing this poem or this text. And that's what really up-levels and develops your marks when you're doing your literature essays, okay? So I want you to start practicing that and thinking about that now. So as you can see from the beautiful kind of colour chart that is on your left, you have a variety of quotes, but they've all got different coloured backgrounds. So guess what? You're going to be working only on the quotes that are in your learner colour. Purple, you're only doing purple. I'm not going to make you do green as well, so don't panic. Okay? So for each of the quotes in your learner colour, try to present at least 3 different interpretations. Reds, try and give me at least 2. Okay, if you can't do 3, that's fine, but give me 2. Okay, different interpretations of aspects. It doesn't have to be an interpretation of the whole quote, but it could be. But it might just be different interpretations of aspects of that quote and how it gives us, how we could interpret the Duke's personality differently, looking at different ways we could explore elements of this quote. And as I've said already, you're only doing this for the quotes in your learner colour. So there's no way you're going to be able to get that done in the time I've been talking. So press pause, write down the quote that from your learner colour, the first one you're going to do, okay? And then you could either do it 3 bullet points underneath, or you could do your interpretations in kind of a quote explosion around it, or you could write it out 3 different times with a different interpretation. It's your choice, okay? I don't mind how that's presented as long as it's clear 3 different interpretations, or possibly 2 different ones for my reds, okay? So pause it now. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Now, this is just a reference to that end of the poem, okay? So, well, mainly it's referencing the end of the poem, but a little bit earlier as well. So, the fresco and the bronze. So, look at the 2 pieces of art above. On the left is a fresco. On the right is a bronze statue. One is an example of a fresco. Another is an example of a bronze. The latter is a bronze of Neptune. Okay, Neptune is the Roman god of the sea. Greek is Poseidon. I think I've remembered that round the right way. What are your responses? So what do you think when looking at that statue? What does it seem to symbolise or suggest, that statue? What words come to mind to describe each art form? Consider the references to both art forms from within the poem. Now, what's really key is that last reference, that bronze statue right at the end. So he says, notice Neptune, though, taming a seahorse. Thought a rarity, which Kraus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. So again, we're naming the sculpture. Again, we've got that sense of name dropping and that idea that this is big kudos. Okay, Neptune, he's a god, powerful. Okay, god of the ocean. The ocean is an incredible, powerful source, and that's what he's in charge of. And taming a seahorse, what could that be symbolic of? Looking at what we've learned about the Duke's character, looking at what we think of him. I mean, let's just look back at a couple of these lines that give us hints to who that Duke is. So he says, sorry, I'm just looking for the line I want. She looked on, and her looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one. My favour her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west. So he's seemingly annoyed that she's happy and gets joy from watching the sunset. He's angry by that because he seems to think that my favourite her breast, so his affection for her, his presence with her should be the only thing that brings her joy. The idea that she gets joy from, looking at a beautiful sunset, he's complaining about. The bough of cherry summer fishers full broke in the orchard for her. Well, the only person in their orchard will be people that work for him. So somebody that works for him is bringing his wife cherries, thinking they're doing a pretty nice thing. They're trying to look after the lady of the house. And because she's pleased with cherries, she's shown gratitude. He's angry. He's angered by this. And then he says, if we go down a few lines, to make your will quite clear to such a one. So he's talking about this last duchess and say, just this or that in you disgusts me. So not only is he criticising this very simplistic behaviour, he's telling her that behaviour disgusts him. Think about how dramatic that is. Think about how you'd feel if somebody told you your behaviour disgusted them, especially when all you were doing was smiling or saying thank you or blushing. Maybe because you're grateful, maybe because you're embarrassed, maybe because you're uncomfortable. Here you miss the mark, or there exceed the mark. So either you're not doing enough, you miss, or you're doing too much, you exceed. Is this last Duchess ever able to do anything right? Everything she does is a problem. It's either too little or it's too much. And then he says, "Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her." So she's not being unfriendly to him. She's smiling whenever he walks past her, whenever he comes into the room. But who passed without much the same smile? So because she smiled at other people that are part of his household, because she smiled at them, he's jealous. That's disrespect in his eyes. Much the same smile. So the smile didn't seem better when it was aimed at him than it did at other people. So he says, "This grew." Okay, so is that her smile grew? She was smiling at more people, or is that this frustration, this anger in him grew? You decide. "I gave commands." What does commands mean? It means orders. "I gave commands." Then all smiles stopped together. What do we think that means he's done? What were those commands? Why have those smiles stopped? How does that link to this idea of bringing a reference to Neptune taming a seahorse? How could we link those ideas? How could we link those aspects of that Duke's character? So challenge task, so this is for everyone. Try it if you can, okay? It is a challenge task, so it's not compulsory. Why does the poem end with these lines? What is being suggested about the Duke himself? What is being suggested about the Duke and Duchess and their relationship? And what might it suggest to the Count's envoy? Remember, why is this person that he's talking to there? This person he's talking to is there to arrange another marriage for the Duke. What might this suggest to it? Why might the Duke have pointed this out? Okay, that is the end of this tutorial. Some of you are doing brilliantly with taking pictures of your annotations and your notes and sending them to me. They're looking fantastic. Please continue to do so. I wanted to get your whole class marking ready for you today, but I haven't been able to do that because I had another training session I had to go on, and just time just ran away with me. And also I've had to wait till later on in the day to film the tutorial because there's workmen outside my house and the noise made it unbearable to try and record anything. So I'm hoping they'll be gone on Thursday. I'm in school on Wednesday, as some of you will know, so I can't record it then. So I'll put together the whole class marking PowerPoint and very short tutorial and try and get that up and go on Thursday. Have a lovely rest of your week. If you've got any questions regarding this, please just give me an email or pop a message up in the group on Teams, and I will see some of you tomorrow. Goodbye, Year 10.